Could we see the premier pregame college football show in Morgantown week 1 versus Penn State at Milan Puskar Stadium? Stick around and find out right after this word from our sponsor. This episode of Mountaineer Paul Talks Football is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across the state of West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com, or you can come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you.
This is for Cameron.
What is up, guys? Welcome in. My name is Mountaineer Paul, and this is another edition of Mountaineer Paul Talks Football. My allergies are kicking my hind end again. It's that time of year for me, guys. As you know, I've also had some family stuff going on. So I've had a little break over the last week and a half. There's not been a lot of content out there to talk about as well. But I found a little nugget of something I thought would be interesting to talk about and consider since we're in the off season. And something that excites me is any kind of national exposure for our program. I'm sure Penn State fans feel the same way. And I mean, on my book, and of course I'm coming at this from a little bit of a bias perspective, but even objectively looking at this, you can make a really strong case that Penn State, West Virginia is the best week 1 game out there. There's history, there's tradition. It is skewed Penn State's way, but there's still history and tradition there. The fan bases don't necessarily like each other, especially amongst the older fans of the fan bases. And then you match it up against games that are also on that October 31st slate, August 31st slate. And we match up really, really well. So we're going to have a look at that and then just kind of talk about that stuff really quick. Let's get into the slate of games. Let's go down the list a little bit, little by little bit. Obviously, the first one that jumps off is, Alabama's not going to get it because they're playing Western Kentucky, although the DeBoer hiring and the Saban retirement is big news. I'm sure they'll have a huge promo on game day that day, or whatever you want to call it. Then you start going down the list. All these teams, they don't really have a partner until you get to Miami and Florida, which is one of the biggest rivalries in college football. Miami has a new transfer quarterback. Florida is trying to get back to where they've been in the past. I wouldn't be surprised to see either or both of these teams ranked, although they weren't very good last year. It just comes with the territory of having those names, the Florida and the Miami Hurricanes logos beside your name. And then you look at the very next week, Clemson and Georgia, which is, in my opinion, is obviously the biggest contender and probably the best game on the slate. Clemson obviously coming off a 9-win season, not up to their standards as of late, and a lot of talk about Dabo and his unwillingness to change. And then you've got just the Kirby Smart-led, almost unbeatable Georgia Bulldogs. And certainly they are a huge TV draw. They will be on game day possibly 2 or 3 times a year. They've got the front runner at quarterback returning next year, probably for the Heisman. And they return a team that's going to be extremely explosive on offense, and they'll probably restock on defense as always. Clemson is going to be looking to obviously take Georgia out, reestablish themselves as a national perennial contender. The Alabama shift has to go somewhere, and Clemson's going to try to have to take that back. So, in my opinion, this is the single biggest threat to Penn State, West Virginia. Then you keep going down the list. There are no partners for Ole Miss, Southern Miss, Kentucky. Mississippi State, Eastern Kentucky, Murray State, Missouri, who's probably going to be good next year, Missouri. South Carolina has nobody. Tennessee has nobody. Texas has got Colorado State. That's not a big deal. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Here's another marquee game. Obviously, you've got a brand new coach in Texas A&M, so that's going to be a little bit of a situation to watch there as Elko gets that thing rolling. I don't know how much national interest there is, but it's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and it's Texas A&M. So, this is another game that obviously scares you when you talk about, and it's at Kyle Field, so the fact that it's not in Notre Dame helps because I think Texas A&M lost a lot of its brand appeal with Jimbo leaving. Elko will take it a year or two to build that thing back up. Virginia Tech Vanderbilt's a good game, but it's not a nationally looked at game, I would say. Florida International, Indiana, no. Illinois State, Iowa, no. Maryland, UConn, no. Michigan has no running back with Fresno. You get to Michigan State, no running mate. Nebraska, no running mate. Ohio State has Akron, no running mate. Oregon, Idaho. And there's West Virginia, Penn State. Howard, Rutgers, UCLA, Hawaii, Washington, Weber State, Western Michigan, and Wisconsin. And then you've got this slate of games here, which, you just look down the list. There are literally no running mates on 99% of these games. Colorado is always a draw, but they've got North Dakota State. So that's not going to, in my opinion, change much. Oklahoma State has nobody to run with this week. BYU. There's nothing on this list here either, overall. So it looks pretty good. There's a small sample size, and I don't know. You look at Arizona and New Mexico, that could possibly be a sneaky game, but it's not going to get in over the games that we've already talked about. And then you look at these games here, Sunday and Monday. Obviously, if LSU and USC is on the Saturday slate, you have to feel right up there with Georgia and Clemson, worried about that game. But it's on Sunday, and I don't know if that plays a factor. I have seen Game Day do a game for Sunday on Saturday before, but it's very rare because obviously it helps for the people not to have to camp out a whole nother day after game day because that's just a big event. So highly unlikely that these games will be featured on game day, but I thought I'd show them anyway. Florida State, Boston College. After everything Florida State went through, I think a lot of the country is some people are in Florida State's corner, some people are not. But there's a lot of interest in Florida State in the offseason that they're having. So that's the basic slate of games. And if it weren't for that Georgia-Clemson game, I would go ahead and say pencil it in. I feel really strongly about West Virginia, Penn State this year. I think we're going to get two ranked teams. I think it's going to be – we might not be ranked, but Penn State for sure going to be ranked. I think we're going to be right there in the French top 25. If we get a ranking next to our name, then you're talking about we're right up there with anybody else, although Georgia and Clemson are both going to be ranked as well. Notre Dame's going to re-rank. Texas A&M likely to be ranked with as much talent as they have. So it's, we're not going to be the only ranked matchup, but certainly we're one of four, right? One of 3 or 4 matchups you look at and say, okay, they got a shot. And then you look at, okay, does Fox have the rights to this game? Does, and how does it work with all how the networks want things to go? So I think we can get lucky. We're definitely going to get a primetime slot, but we want game day. The last time West Virginia had game day in town, and they say this about a lot of places, they said it was one of the best that they've ever experienced. I watched it live. I was extremely proud of how we supported our Mountaineers that day. And to be honest, I really do think we're an all-timer. Like, if you go look at our game day, just look it up on YouTube, it's up there with anybody that's ever done a game day. Just go check it out, because we showed up in droves for that game. I believe it was the LSU game, 2011. So you put us up against Penn State, which will have huge regional bragging rights, and I'm telling you, there'll be 70,000 people in that stadium. So let me know, guys, down in the comments. How do you feel about the possibility of game day? coming to Morgantown. Is it possible? Do you think one of the other games are going to get we're going to have precedence over West Virginia, Penn State? Like the video for me as well. Would really appreciate that. As always, subscribe to Mountaineer Paul Talks Football if you're a Penn State fan. I'm going to be doing some Penn State content in the offseason this year now. I said I was going to last year. I know too much about the team. Like I know a lot of the guys on that roster, and I really enjoy researching Penn State. So I think I'm going to do a couple Penn State videos as well this offseason, so be looking for that. And obviously my Mountaineer people, you guys do my foundation, my base. You guys are pretty much everything to me when it comes to these videos. So like, share, subscribe, all the whole thing. I can't close this video out without bringing up one other factor that could play, I think, a huge role in this, and that's the Pat McAfee factor. Probably should throw him on the thumbnail. So Pat McAfee obviously has, I don't want to say he has a say in game day, but he has a voice. And I think, maybe we can get him to put some pressure on. I'm going to try to get something going on social media rolling. I'd like to get Pat McAfee's attention and see if we can't get game day to come to Morgantown. First game of the year, baby. So we'll preview this game officially as the game gets closer. It's much too early. There's still transfers to be had, roster movement to be done. We just had 2 guys leave last week. So, things are still moving along and rosters are still being finalized. We'll see how it all works out, guys. But hope you liked the video. Certainly keep coming back. Can't wait to do another one, guys. Sorry for the little hiatus there. It's been rough. So appreciate your patience with me as always. This has been another edition of Mountaineer Paul Talks Football. This episode is over. I'm out.